Hello there, kia ora. Yesterday marked the 1 year anniversary of the election that saw the current coalition put into power. So, to mark the moment, One News released a poll, which I'll get to shortly. Remember, when it comes to polls, they're really good for seeing trends, but we're still at least 6 months out from a snap election caused by the change of deputy prime ministers and which one can make the most noise to get the attention of the media, tearing down the ever more tenuous relationship between two highly volatile coalition partners and national. And it's also important to remember that when it comes to polls, they're often presented in isolation. So the results of the Kantar One News poll will reference the last One News Kantar poll, but probably not the polls from Roy Morgan and Curia that came out over the last couple of weeks. And each poll does this. They compare to their own data sets. So the way to see the actual trends are to look at a variety of polls to see if the trends are in fact, well, trending, or if we're looking at some rogue elements. But before we get to that, let's take a look at how the coalition celebrated their 1 year anniversary. New Zealand First held their AGM in Kirikiriroa, Hamilton. Only you're not allowed to call it that because it's got Te Reo Māori in it. Where Winston Peters claimed normal people are endangered. He made comments referencing that time Chumbawamba told him to leave their name out of his mouth, pushed the "we just want fairness in women's sport" anti-trans dog whistle, claimed his party had done more for Māori than all other parties combined and that young people today have no standards in Parliament, and claimed that his party don't work on ideological soundbites. You know, the party of removing Te Reo Māori and making English an official language, pushing anti-trans rhetoric and COVID mandate protester talking points, demanding the removal of tools like RSE from school. They're totally not about ideological soundbites. ACT celebrated culling over 2,000 public servants and then blamed the drop in New Zealand university rankings on treaty obsessions, then rattled off a really long list of things that they really want to take credit for. And National put out a tweet saying they're delivering on their core promises of rebuilding the economy. You know, the economy that's seen steady price increases on basic cost of living with less expenditure, higher unemployment rates, Treasury throttling interest rates because the economy was restricting spending too much, and the biggest exodus of New Zealanders overseas in a decade. They're also apparently delivering on law and order, which saw massive spikes in violent crimes in areas that aren't Auckland Central, while implementing punitive responses that have been proven not to work, while also breaching the Bill of Rights Act to look tough on crime. And they also said something about delivering better public services, like we're seeing in, for example, our health sector, with hiring freezes, understaffed hospitals, downgraded services, and more expensive primary healthcare options, questions around mental health funding allocations, the Office of Suicide Prevention existing in name only as staff are made redundant, and costs back on prescription medicines, as just one example of the many areas where services are clearly getting better. Oh, they also announced that they're making the Waitemata Harbour a special sanctuary to help rebuild fish populations in the area, which you'll be able to catch using special nets, completely negating the plan to rebuild native fish populations. So, how does that play out in the polls? Well, the latest Kantar poll says 2/3 of us think the country is no better or it's worse off than it was a year ago. On the flip side, about 10% less of people say that they are no worse off or think the country is getting better than a year ago. And most people who say that are likely to vote for ACT or New Zealand First, which isn't really a surprise. After all, it seems like there wasn't a policy the tiny support parties didn't get into the coalition agreements. Of course, the very small amounts of people who voted for them are going to be happy with that. And the further south you go down the country, the unhappier people seem with the government as well. As for the poll itself, well, it's not really impactful or concerning for any political party because of how far out the election should be. But Chris Hipkins did raise a point on the story on this, where he said he was looking at how the parties are trending over all the polls so far. And that's slightly better news for Labour, with recent poll trends showing a general uptick in support, with a general trend of National losing support, which you can see in this, which is a poll of all the polls that have been taken this year. But the support parties have a different problem. When you're using a sample size of 1,000 people, it can be a lot more difficult to get an accurate idea of polling because the numbers in support are closer to the margin of error. There are also some issues with methodology and adjustments being made for sample weighting, which can impact the support parties more. And of course, no poll results, including these ones, usually include the number of people who don't know how they would vote, which for last night was 9%. which is more than the vote count for 2 coalition parties and 1 opposition party, which is another reason to remember that polls are really good at giving us trends to look at. And this far out from an election, be it 6 months when Winston decides to make a lot of mess to get his poll numbers up, or 12 months when David Seymour throws his toys because National actually said no to him for once, or even 2 years by the grace of whichever deity managed to hold them all together that long, they're all right for talking points. But when it comes to these polls, nothing is set in stone by them at this stage in the game. Wait, you're still here? It's over. Find another video.